Hey juniors, so this is going to be a hopefully short video in how to clean your 45 caliber precision 1911 pistol. I'm making this short series of videos for you guys, for anyone who's got extra time on their hands. So since everyone is kind of sequestered at home and really can't get out, for those of you that are shooting 45, this is a good opportunity to show you how to clean one. Now, some of you may already have some idea, some of you that have dads that have got some idea of how to do this, but this is the way I like to do it. So if there's any little tips or tricks that you can pick up from watching me do this, then that's great. If not, then don't sweat it. Just like anything else when it comes to firearms, there are a million ways to do the same thing, but this is what works good for me. So just a couple of things you want to have before you get started. And yes, I am wearing the nitrile gloves, not because I'm afraid of passing any germs back and forth, but because it's a really messy job and it makes cleanup so much easier. So getting right down to it, essentially the tools that you want to have for the gun is you've got to have a bushing wrench. All right, bushing wrenches look like this. There's lots of other types of bushing wrenches. Let me get another one here. One that looks like this, but you see they've all got that same shape of that front bushing, and that front bushing is this part on the front here. I guess what I should do is prove to you that the gun is unloaded. All right, and clear, lock back, drop the hammer, all clear here. So again, so this is just the way that I like to do things, and hopefully you can pick up some little tips on what's going to work best for you. So getting right down to it, remember that cleaning a precision 1911 is not like cleaning your run-of-the-mill 1911. The tolerances on these guns are so much tighter that you're not going to be able to use your fingertips to do some of the adjustments that people do on other guns. For instance, that bushing wrench I just showed you about, basically a lot of people can take this bushing with their fingers and twist it around. But with these precision guns, you cannot do it. They are way, way, way too tight. So let's just kind of get down to it. First thing we want to do is we have to field strip it. We have to get the slide off of the frame. And the way we're going to do that is we look for these little cuts that are here in the slide. And specifically the little notch that's cut out there in the slide. And I hope you can see that. Essentially what you want to do is you want to push that little notch back, and I apologize for the shaking, back to the edge of the cutout that your thumb switch for the slide release is resting in. So if you push that back just enough so it's there, and with my other finger on the other side of the gun here, I'm pushing that through. You see how that came through there? And then I can just kind of grab it and slide that release out there. Once you've done that, okay, you just want to kind of hang on to things here. And you can see now it wants to kind of push it off the frame, but I'm not going to let it do that yet. What I'm going to do is I'm going to push this back just a little bit. Okay. And I'm going to grab that bushing wrench, pop it on there, and I'm going to twist it, hopefully, to get the right grip. I'm kind of like compromising myself here for the sake of the camera. So let me just get this off camera real quick so I can show you. Okay, so we twist this off to the side. Now notice I'm putting my hands over the front of the gun, because if I just take the bushing wrench away and move my hand away, the spring that's pushing up here is going to launch it into the sky. You don't want to lose that. So once that's done, now notice the bushing has been turned to the side, so I can now take the recoil spring out. Sometimes it gets a little stuck. That's fine. And then we can take this bushing wrench and we can swing it all the way back to this side, which is going to help us get that out. And now that we've got the recoil spring out and set aside, the bushing has been turned, and we have our slide release out, we can now move the slide off of the frame. I'm going to put the frame aside for now. Okay, and we're going to have our little doohickey here. Now let's take the barrel out of the gun. So the barrel, if you grab it by the link, this little thing here is called the link. All right, this is what that little post of that slide release slides into. Okay, I'm going to slide this out, and now it's stuck by the bushing. So if we just kind of tap it, you'll notice you can kind of like a little impact hammer, you can just kind of pull that out, bushing it all. So here's the bushing and the barrel, and yes, it's quite dirty. Actually, not as dirty as I've ever seen it get, but dirty enough so that you can see where the dirt collects. Now, once we've done that, we've basically got our naked slide here and our optic. Now, normally before I start this, and of course I forgot to do it, I'll do it now, I'll put, this is called our bra, over our optic, just so no solvents or dirt or anything like that gets onto the glass of our optic, because we don't want that. Once we've got that separated here, I like to initially start with a piece of either paper towel or, better yet, a piece of shop cloth. Now, this is essentially heavy-duty paper towel that does not leave lint. All right, so it's a tougher paper towel made for automotive and places like that. You can get them in Costco, and they sell them for in like a little box. So I just like to wipe down the surfaces, and you can see quite a bit of fouling is coming off that. The reason I wipe it down first is because if you've been oiling the gun properly for as long as you should have during matches, during practices, then the oil will trap a lot of the fouling and remove some of the need to really go digging in here. Now, again, some of the other coaches do have other ways of doing this. Not that those ways are wrong. They're just not necessarily the way that I would do it. I know that Coach Ken is a big fan of flooding his gun with WD-40, letting it sit a little bit and then blasting it out with air. Does that work? Sure. The few times that I've done it, I don't feel it does quite as thorough a job as I would like on my gun, but again, that's my gun. And again, it doesn't mean that it's wrong. Okay, once I've done some wiping down, I'm going to put aside the slide. Let's take the frame, and I'm going to do the same thing with the inside of the frame. Hopefully my cinematography here is adequate so you can see what I'm doing here. All right, so we want to really get into all these little nooks and crannies, all the rails. All right, we have our little feed ramp here. You want to make sure that's clean. Everything on all the sides. Okay, that's pretty good here. Now, notice with the frame, the hammer is still cocked. Do not pull the trigger at this point. You do not want this hammer falling onto the frame when there's no slide in place. You will snap the hammer off. If for any reason you have to drop that hammer, okay, get your finger on it, really pinch it tight, pull the trigger, okay, and then just kind of like ride the hammer forward in case you ever needed to get, maybe there's some gunk underneath or whatever. But what I like to do then is, once I've done that, recock the hammer and leave it there, okay? Put the frame aside. So the next step, real simple, is I like to take a nylon brush, okay? You want the softest bristles possible here. And if your bristles are extraordinarily dirty like these are, you can just kind of brush them. I apologize for the camera shake. Brush them here just to get them a little cleaner. Okay, I don't like to use the brass brushes on this part because I find that those little brass bristles will snap off sometimes, and that drives me crazy if I find brass bristles and everything. So what I like to do is with the dry brush, just kind of quickly brush in one direction. I like to go from front to back. anything that's loose, any debris that might be caught in there, any fouling that we didn't catch with the paper towel. Just kind of go through it there. If you need the fine end to get into some of those little nooks and crannies, you can do that. Okay, and then the same thing with the frame. Get down into that mag well. Brush the fouling up and out. Okay, and this is not doing so much cleaning, more than loosening. Okay, so what I like to do then is sometimes if I have a lot of debris in there, I'll take one of my favorite tools for cleaning a gun, which is one of these wooden skewers that you can get in any supermarket. And I like to kind of go in there and dig around any little nooks and crannies that might have fouling in it. And you'll find if you look to the inside of your slide here, usually around this area, around where the firing pin is, and the back of the chamber, you can get quite a bit of gunk building up in there. I'm not going to be going into the details of taking out the extractor or any of that stuff. We'll do another video on that if we need to. So we're just doing more of a quick cleaning with this. Okay, not too bad today. Okay, so once you've dug out anything in there that you can manage, I'll take a patch. Now, some of us don't use patches anymore, so you can use cotton t-shirts, you can use rags, as long as there's no lint coming off on anything. You don't want to have to start blowing lint out of your gun. I'm going to take a little bit of solvent. In this case, I'm using Gunzilla. Gunzilla is kind of a nice solvent because it has absolutely no smell, which may not be entirely true. There's a tiny bit of a smell, but I think it's more like it smells more like celery seeds than a solvent. And this way, Gene won't kill me for stinking up the house with solvent. So essentially, I'm going to take, now you can see there's quite a bit of gunk in there still. You know, even though we've done the wiping and the brushing, the solvent really does a job on this. So you want to just kind of run through all the surfaces with the solvent. When it gets ridiculously dirty, toss to the side. Get the next patch, go over the same areas, and basically you want to just keep working those areas until the patch comes away mostly clean. Now, getting into some of these nooks and crannies down here, what I like to do is stick the patch there. Again, take my favorite tool, the skewer, and just kind of go back and forth and scooch around some of these areas here. Okay, to get that out of there. And yes, of course, if the wooden skewer is not doing it, I've got all kinds of picks and stuff and all different types. He has a brass one for really, really stubborn areas that you can get into. But I always find that 80% of what I'm trying to do gets done with the wooden skewer. Okay, so let's get that. Let's get a little bit into the ejection port here. Some of that down. Okay, that's pretty dirty. And I'm going to take one more patch. Actually, I'll put out a couple of patches here because we'll have to do the frame also. A little more Gunzilla. Okay. Always remember to close up your solvent tube, not only because of the smell, which this one doesn't have, but they will evaporate on you. And they're not cheap, so wipe down the outside, because the salts from your fingers, your sweat, and just your natural handhold and your manipulation of the gun will start to take its toll on the gun in time. So don't neglect the outside when it comes to your cleaning. Okay, let's make sure all that's going. See, that's coming out kind of gray instead of black now. So I always find that it's impossible to get every last little bit of dirt out of there, but do the best you can. Okay. This aside, let's do the same thing with the frame. Okay, let's get rid of this patch, get another one. Okay, the rails. And again, this gun is not filthy. It was just a little dirty. So it would take a lot longer if the gun was absolutely filthy. If this was after a practice and then a 2700, and if I let it go to even another practice, which I probably wouldn't do, but is not unheard of, this would be much dirtier. Okay, so we'll get that thrown out. Do the outside as well. The relatively clean patch. Wipe your trigger down. Again, I apologize if any of my cinematography seems to have gone off kilter here. Okay, let's get that cleaned out. Okay, so that is pretty good. A little bit of gunk in here. Okay, all that. This side looks pretty good. A little tiny bit there. Okay. If it's really, really dirty, I'll even take a little pipette or like one of these little medical eyedroppers that I have here, and I will put some drops of solvent onto the frame and slide to the really dirty areas and just kind of let it sit, maybe even for an hour or two, just to loosen everything up. Okay, let's get this out of there. Okay, good. All right, not too bad. Find a relatively clean part of our towel. Kind of wipe everything down to get the excess solvent off. That in there. Okay. Well, I hope all of you are surviving the pandemic so far. I, for one, don't know anyone that has been officially diagnosed with the COVID virus. I hope you can say the same. Okay, so this is pretty much wiped down. That's good. Okay, so the frame and the slide is done. We're going to put that aside. Now, let's look at the barrel. Now, even though this towel is still pretty dirty, that's okay. It's clean enough because we have to want to wipe down the gunk that is on that barrel. So let's just wipe it down as best we can. Remember, the barrel is the part of the gun that you've been oiling the most all throughout your practices, all throughout your matches. And the oil that you're putting onto this barrel is kind of spreading all around the inside of the gun as you're firing it. So it's pretty easy to clean the outside of the barrel because of all that oil you've got on there. And I'll show you a little trick before we put this back together that might even help with that. Okay, so we've got the outside of the barrel done. Let's do the same thing for the bushing, our really, really tight bushing. The tightness of this bushing ensures your nice tight grouping that the gun can produce for you. Okay. All right, bushing is pretty good. That. A little recoil spring post. Now, some of you have guns that have what's called a full-length guide rod. So if this is the recoil spring and this is the cap that goes in the front that sticks out the very front of the gun, this is what goes into the back here. So basically, when it's in the gun, it's in this configuration. Some of you have what's called a full-length guide rod. That is, this part here extends all the way out into the recoil spring. There's great debate as to whether or not that actually does what it's supposed to do. A lot of people have come to the determination that it's kind of a gimmick, that it's the rails and the interconnectivity of the rails on the slide and the frame that keep the gun firing straight and sure and true. But some people swear by them. They do add a little bit of weight to the front of the gun. And if you have that, you just have to take that out first. Okay. Last thing I'm going to do here is I'm just going to kind of wipe down the spring. There's no need to really use solvent on this unless it's super, super dirty, which it probably isn't. Okay. All right. Bench a little bit. Okay, let's get rid of that. Okay, so we've got our components that are relatively clean, except probably one of our most important ones, which is the inside of this barrel. That is pretty dirty. So let's get some patches going. Now, the first thing you're going to want to do is you're going to want to use a .45 caliber brush and scrub out the inside of that barrel. Very important, though, you never, ever want to use a dry brush. All right, you always want to make sure that there's some solvent or some lubricant on that brush. So I'm just going to spread these patches out, take our Gunzilla, angle it down, and I'm just going to put some solvent on the brush and let the excess drip onto the patches, which I'm going to need to run through the barrel anyway. Take the barrel, use the brush from the back of the barrel toward the front, stick it all the way in until it comes all the way out. Do not ever reverse the direction of the brush while it's inside the barrel. By reversing that direction, all of those little bristles that are being bent in one direction or the other, if you reverse them, they'll snap off and get stuck in the rifling. So don't do that. So all the way through, all the way out. All the way through, all the way out. And keep going about 10 times. Apologize for the shaking. And what this is doing is basically scrubbing out all the little nooks and crannies of the rifling that's in there. Once done, take one of your wet patches. This one's a little dry. Stick it on the end there. And I start with the back of my favorite wooden skewer and just kind of shove it back. Now you can see there's very little resistance there, but look how much it took out, even with that very tiny bit of resistance from that wooden skewer. All right, so that one is done. Next one, I'll do the same thing. Kind of twirl it around in there just to try to catch as much surface as I can. Do the same thing with the back. Okay, get rid of that. And now that I've gotten a lot of the gunk out of there, I'll take a much fatter dowel rod, a little bit closer to .45 caliber, and shove it in there. Reverse it. You never want to use a dirty side of the patch. Shove that in there. Okay. And you can see it's coming out more gray than black now. Let's do this one. Oops. Okay. Even cleaner. Other side. Okay. That's pretty good. These ones that we have left over, we'll just do another wipe down to the outside with the solvent. Catch any dirt we might have missed. Make sure that the link is nice and clean. And if the link is excessively dirty, I'll go back to that nylon brush and just kind of brush off the link. Move into the up position, brush it all off, wipe it down. Okay, that's pretty good. An extra patch sitting over there. Okay, so looks like we're in pretty good shape here. So now it's just about reassembly. So now I'll remind you again, there's a lot of different ways to do this and a lot of YouTube videos that you'll see out there. A lot of people will swear that there's only one right way to do it and blah, blah, blah. But trust me, there's more than one right way to do it. There are quite a few absolutely wrong ways to do it, but the wrong ways are really hard to do with a gun like this because, again, the tolerances are so tight that there's really no way to do it in a way that's going to damage these guns, because it just won't fit. All right, so first thing I like to do is we want to add a little bit of lubrication to the barrel. And as far as that's concerned, yes, you can absolutely use oil. It's fine. But I like to use a little bit of grease. And this is the grease I have from lubrikit.com. I just, read an article on these guys, and I liked their stuff. Put a little bit here, a little bit there. You don't need a lot. And I just kind of rub it all in with my finger. The reason I've used grease on this is I find it kind of sets up like a base layer, a real base, so that when the fouling does start to stick, you still have this layer of grease between the fouling. It doesn't run back and forth all over the place like it does with oil. And it just does a better job in the long run. All right, so barrel gets slide in. Notice I've got the slide upside down, slid the barrel in upside down. The link is moving back and forth nice and free. Next part that goes in is the recoil spring. Okay. And you'll notice that the shape of that post has got that little cutout on the bottom that will fit the shape, the round shape of the barrel. So that rests right down on the barrel. Okay, hope you can see that. Lift the link into the up position. Slide that back as far as it'll go, and rest the link against it. Hope you can see that. See how the link is now resting against the back of the post. Okay, let's get now is when I like to get a little bit of lubrication into there. So let's get a drop of oil onto this side, onto this side, onto the frame itself, a little bit here. You don't want too much. There are some people that believe that their guns need to be dunked in oil, but I assure you that's not the case. And as a matter of fact, some people will put this much lubrication on both the slide and the frame. I don't. I actually just lubricate the slide part of it. Now, when putting it back on to the frame, this can get a little tricky. I like to do it upside down. So what I have is here's the frame. Turn the frame upside down. Grab the underside, in which case would be the top because it's upside down, the underside of the slide. And I like to stick my finger on the recoil spring and kind of push down a little bit. You see what I'm doing there? By doing that, I'm holding it in place because this thing is notorious. It likes to slide back and forth as you're pushing the slide into place. So what I'm going to do is try to hold it there. It doesn't always work the first time. I engage the slide in the frame, slide it in, kind of give it a little shake. I've still got my finger on there. And now I can hold the front of the gun, and I'm looking through the little hole here. All right. I'm looking for the hole of the link, and I can see now that I've got the hole of the link right through there. Now I want to be careful because I want to stick the post in there to hold it in place without the link flopping back and forth. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to gently turn it over this way, and now I can take the post and just kind of stick it in there. Okay, and yeah, there's a lot of lubricant all over the place now. That's fine. And yes, this is not in the proper position, but now no matter what I do with this slide, I've got the link trapped underneath the slide release. Okay, so now just as we did before, and actually let me take a rag and just wipe off a little bit of this lubricant here. As you can see, there's more than enough lubricant on there. And what I'll do is I'll just kind of push this back. So again, that little cutout has to be even with the back, see that, of that frame cutout that allows your slide release to go in. Position the slide release right in that little nub there. That nub has a spring behind it. So it's got a tough spring behind it, but if you put it right on top and you've got it correct, you should be able to push it right into place. Now, in this particular gun and a lot of your guns, just because you got it in one click doesn't mean it's all the way. You have to really push to make sure it's all the way in there. Hear that second click? Now it's all the way in. It should be absolutely flush with the frame. And by tilting it this way, I'll show you with the little pointer, there should be no space between the frame and the flat part of that slide release. All right, so now it's in correctly. Now we have to deal with the front of the gun. Okay, so what we're gonna do here is I'm gonna angle this up. We're gonna take our bushing, and now the bushing has to go on the same way you took it off. All right, so it has to go on facing this way because it's got this little nub there that has to fit on the right way. So we slide that on there. And what I like to do is, because again, it's a really tight tolerance there, I'll take my little mallet with the little plastic end and I'll gently tap that down into place. All right. Now, the problem is we have to angle this bushing from this side to this side, but the spring is in the way. So I find that just by gently tapping on the bushing, it'll push past the spring. Yeah, the spring will start wobbling and stuff, but it's fine. Okay, and I'll try to catch the back end here. And you can see it goes aside very easily. I'll take the little cap, stick it on the end of the spring. Okay, now you have to hold on to this carefully. If you don't, it's going to launch itself into orbit. All right, so you want to use all your finger strength, get it down in there. Okay, take our bushing wrench, push it over the top, and now I'm using the bushing wrench to hold that part down. Notice how I'm really holding on to that. And now I turn the bushing wrench so that the bushing lines up with the little cap, and you can see it's perfectly aligned. And then that's it. It's back together. And we know that we did it correctly if we can rack it. You can rack it, let go, and it slams back. You know it's perfect. And then, of course, we have to drop the hammer, test it a couple of times, and boom, it's great. Now, again, you will see a lot of leftover lubricant on there. So let's get another one of these shop towels, nice and clean. First, I'll wipe off the gloves, and then we'll just kind of wipe down the frame. I'm okay with a little extra lubricant coming out onto the frame, because that lubricant that I'm now not only wiping off but spreading around will protect the metal from the salts of our fingers. Salt, the sweat, any water whatsoever. And if you did it correctly and you've got the grease on there, but even if you have oil, that's fine. The back of the barrel will have this nice dull kind of color to it. That means the grease has been spread around nicely. And that's it. That's really all there is to it. That's how you disassemble, do a quick clean, and reassemble of your Precision 1911 pistol. Obviously, I've done this more than once. If you have any trouble, feel free to give me a call, shoot me a text, and I'll walk you through it if you have any issues with that. If you have any questions on the theory or the order of how you do things, feel free to reach out. All right, guys? So have fun with it. Enjoy your project. Clean those guns. And the next one I'm going to do is cleaning a Hammerly. All right? Speak to you soon.